Wasn't me. No.
How's it going?
Good. How you doing?
We still have Stefan in the fold? Sir?
Yeah, good. Good to
See,
see you.
you've been out there spotting sharks?
I was so just depressed at that news. You saw Save the Sounds post? That wasn't me that posted that. I have a healthy fear
Oh, so now they're
of
gonna
sharks. And I was very happy to do my swims without white sharks at Todd's Point.
Yep.
And I'm gonna question that shark tracker until they can prove beyond reasonable doubt that that shark actually was off the coast of Byram, was it?
Oh, the Osa Ark? Well, it does ping.
I don't, but it happened 2 years ago and it wasn't true. In Guilford.
Oh, really?
Guilford, and they're like, no, it wasn't true. It's the GPS, those signals. Okay, so I like a healthy Long Island sound. The whales, check. Like dolphins, check. Yeah, I know, it's incredible. And the sharks come with them. So what are you gonna do?
Morning, sir.
But I will
Yeah,
be-
it's a little late in the morning.
I always swim in twos out there, anyways. Now I'll have 4 or 5 people.
Will you announce this one? Don't
I
just
don't know how
start
you
from
feel
there.
about the shark.
Okay.
That's obviously how I
yeah.
feel.
Okay, fair
I
enough.
do see. I do. I know, man. I'm gonna fight the old pinging society and make sure they didn't. And then the papers picked up white sharks spotted in Greenwich. No one spotted it. No one spotted that shark. White shark. No.
Anything,
Hearsay. Rumor.
not even being hurt?
We have a lot of doctors. Made a mess of them. Trying to get some
tried not
sanity
to.
back.
I decided it was easier to work from the back forward when I put it in. Because
That's
usually
what
I
I'm looking for. I can't find my dingle town. I'll look it with you, okay? Because I'm gonna stop looking for it. I may have left that one somewhere. Gone through the stack.
had to have a very rushed dinner.
So not even being hurt?
Yeah, me
Went
too.
down to a marinade.
Where'd you eat in the marinade?
No,
This might
we
be,
ate at
this
home.
might be,
Grandson is graduating,
I'm not gonna say it, but
and he's on the baseball team, and they were playing today.
Hey.
So we went. Well, they were down 2-0, and I had to leave.
Those, did you see the Yankees?
I heard about it. I didn't see it.
It's a fun one to watch.
what do you recommend?
Thoroughly
Good evening. It's pretty flimsy there.
So this is,
Disappointed?
so we are, we won't talk
When
about it.
did you?
They can present it, but
Right in the end of the month. I don't know the exact date. Let's see, I probably put it on the phone,
so this is,
so I don't forget. Which I tend to do.
requesting a delay, or we just don't even bring it up?
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Grandma, what's going on? How are you doing? Peachy keen. Thank you.
Good evening.
Come on, me
Quite positive.
I'll be out of your way.
For Monday? A dry Monday for a change?
That's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff. There's. Yeah, it does. Good evening, sir.
Mr. Galvin, how are you?
I'm all right. Considering all the alternatives?
Yeah, that's true. And who would listen anyways?
That's true.
I've joined a rod and gun club.
You what?
I've joined a rod and gun club.
That's nice. Oh, I wish it was that skinny. Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. Tamarack.
Oh. Dominic is up there too, yeah. Good.
If you ever want to go see some plays,
Oh, I love that.
was here.
Run through the whole thing. Just need a little discipline. Was this yours or mine? All of this stuff is mine. All this stuff is yours? No, all of this stuff.
Okay, number 7 is punted.
This is brand new. King Street, that's yours. Okay. Well, I also was not gonna wear socks.
Well, I just said, sure.
Take
You know, I knew you would notice, which is why I did. I was hoping you were going to. See if we were downstairs yet. Nobody would know, but now, I mean, even on television, people are going to be writing their congressmen and saying, what the hell?
This is 620, okay, so this is next one.
Are the big changes between the annotated version and the? No? I like, yeah, but I like the annotated.
Did you say it was your man?
My grandson.
How you been? I have been muddling along. Muddling.
What position did you play?
Mostly the bench. He is very fast.
Yeah.
If you stand up and,
Yeah.
and
The
man up.
short thing where I
Where
I got,
he was the outfield. He started
harassed by
out.
an attorney out of a
Second
post office plus place. This is an article about stuff that these guys do.
Yeah, as you get older.
He just never could develop any private.
He did?
How you been?
Just for someone who is as coordinated as he is, I mean, he really loves basketball. And he was playing for the he was 6 years old.
Yeah, right.
Right up until, I mean, he was this small for the high school team. For the last 14 years.
Oh, did you hit a bad pass?
So they really know each other.
Yeah, that helps. That really helps.
It's, the last few years, he's learned to get more aggressive. He plays off the wall by himself.
Yeah.
He used to just do the passing.
How are we doing, guys?
The last few years, he started to drive. He's not a driver. He's not afraid to go up against the big guy. Now
There's some full models out there for that
Yeah.
kind of basketball. But
yeah, I'm sure they'll be interested in all that.
yeah, he'll get into like the, what did you say, like the intramural,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and then he can really focus on his studies.
I mean, they're Division III anyway.
What's he studying?
Don't know yet. Probably business, because he has sales ticket. My other grandson, one of my other grandsons, he just finished first year in Michigan. Engineering and switching to computer science.
Good food?
Oh, yeah. So he got an internship out in Palo Alto.
Food restaurant.
So it was interesting, because I've never been really like this thing. He lives in Dearborn.
Splits on there.
It's away, but it's not
Plus
really
being
away.
a
Now he's 3,000.
sailing things every summer. He gets a bunch of us together and they go for like
Good sensation.
It's good for us.
Yeah, it is good. It is good.
and he has,
It brings about.
Yeah.
It has to. It has to.
So I
Have
have
a rope right around home and they got good nights doing it while they do follow. Right, I've seen it. I've seen it. I'm not gonna name names.
Yeah, no worries, man.
Witnessed it. 20 years ago.
101 bowling goes for this one.
Oh,
Came in
okay.
late.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, no, I missed this one too.
Okay.
who was,
And that's for next week. Next week.
okay, sounds good.
A lot. Look at this application.
I'm not very good.
3 times a year.
I'm putting it at like in 15.
It's called, South. Tamarack.
Better not go much later than that. I gotta
Yeah.
It's like right
I
now.
don't feel like this is a healthy, this is since I've been on board. This is
Oh, I know, where it's at. That's where we go. Yeah, nice stuff. Yeah, that's the building.
I go to Tamarack.
I might push till 10 o'clock.
Yeah, we go there. It's really nice. Yeah. My son don't get the vote. I'm leaving. I mean, he's
No,
great.
no, I get to, I gotta, we're gonna go.
Besides on
You were here, but the question down to Sure, you know what I'd like to start doing? Disciples.
I did, yeah, birds were big.
Oh, glad.
What's the number?
There's a lot of unequal trade. That's true. Now, that makes sense, but they do help. You did a days of film for about Marinette. I just have a busy schedule though. I mean, I'm on this agency volunteer, but I'm on work committee. But maybe I'll get back in and they go by myself. Thinking about it, it's weird. I knock on the door first. If they're not there, I don't want someone showing up. Walking around.
It says that Peter.
They're all from the back country too, so they're back.
Right.
That's when I used to live out there. Now I live-
Okay.
Should at least give you a.
Evening, everyone. It's after 7. This is, clock's a little running kind of fast. But this is the May 20th meeting of the Greenwich Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency. The first order of business is seating of alternates. I see that, Peter, you were seated last month, so Klaus, we will seat you tonight. Peter, feel free to comment on anything, however. Next is approval of the draft minutes of March 25th. Oh, no, I'm sorry, of April. Has anyone had a chance to review the minutes? Any questions, comments, or revisions? No? Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Sesto, please. Director's report.
Good evening. The budget was passed on Monday night, which was no surprise. We've got a pretty vanilla budget to put through, so it's hard to do anything with that. We are at the end of our paid internship, and she'll be leading us and Melina will be leading us at the end of May. We then also received 2 interns from the high school, the Greenwich senior intern. We've got one for the Conservation Commission, one signed up for the Wetlands Agency, and we are joyfully switching them all around to do what it is we think will be good for them and helpful to us. And then we filled the positions of the project coordinator and the assistant compliance officer, and those 2 staff members are in training, and I think they're doing very well. So we're all pleased to have a full staff again. Other than that, busy month with a lot of applications. Unfortunately, a good number of them continued for this evening, so we're not going to knock off as many as I would have liked. That is the way those things go.
Okay. Just a question regarding, well, in the past, we've had, within the budget, we've had money for digitization of files. Do we know how far we are along with past files being
We
caught up?
now keep up every year that we are able by state statute to digitize, we do, and the
Okay.
price has come down considerably. It's like a few $1,000s compared to $20,000.
Okay.
What do we have, a 10-year or 7-year
Yeah, I think
paper?
we're through 2011, so we're waiting on the others. And we also have Unicode, Unicity, I don't know, there's so many programs coming from IT. available online. Other departments have had some questions associated with it. Building where you might have interior plans presented, or even planning and zoning, there's some hesitation about how much information to make readily available. But since ours deals with outside of home issues, for me, I don't see that there's a security risk or undue intrusion into people's privacy. Again, all of our stuff is available to anybody who walks in any of the departments. But there's just some feeling that having it online, readily available, versus making somebody go through the effort to come here for some information that's more prudent. But I expect us to get our information up and out, actually, hopefully in the summer. That'll be a good deal.
Thank you. Any other business?
A quick comment. I've been missing a bunch of the site walks, and I've always found them really informative. And there was a while I was going on the weekend solo, and I haven't had any issues with homeowners knocking on the door and such, but I'm probably going to start doing that again. And it'd be nice if we had some maybe form of identification that we could show the homeowners when we're by ourselves, especially.
Typically, that's issued, and at least in the past it has, so I'm not sure.
Just something.
I would
Not
find
like
out-
Deputy Linderoth showing up like a badge or anything, but something that just shows them
ID
what.
cards.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
ID
yeah.
cards that are usually.
Yeah, I'll
issued.
find out whether you guys still go through the police department or you get.
Well, they were just paper cards
Like Christmas
initially.
cards.
Yeah, it's like a,
But do we still have them? They're current? They had an expiration.
We
Peter,
have
I'll
a-
make sure that,
Sort of like Angel.
that I get you the list of sites to go to, so even if the people who are going with me
Thank you.
were a little screwy, I'll make sure you get a heads up so your weekend is.
Yeah, I'll probably be doing them on the weekends.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you. Okay. Any other items?
Badge might be nice.
Okay. Let's move on to the public session. First is public hearing. I was told that the first two applications, 2019-024, 3 and 7 Hillside Road, and 2019-037, 47 Fairfield Avenue, have been continued until next month.
And we do need to vote on 2019-037 to continue them for the next 65 days.
On
Provide
both
them
of,
the extension.
on both of them, or just the second?
I'm sorry?
Just the second one?
Just that we already have it on the
Okay.
first one.
Okay. I'll make a motion to extend application 2019-037. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, thank you. So that brings up 2019-50, 7 Fairway Lane, CLT Fairway LLC for a 2-lot subdivision, 20 feet from wetlands. Mr. Clausen, please.
All right, the documents in the file include the application with the standard supporting documentation signed by the applicant's agent, Mr. Muller here. The plan set, which, the original plan set, which was dated April 10th, 2019. A restoration and enhancement planting plan prepared by Tracy Shalafo, Connecticut landscape architect, dated April 14th, 2019. A project narrative with a discussion of 2 alternatives, which was prepared by Mr. Muller, that was dated April 16th. 2 sketch plans of these alternatives labeled number 1 and number 2. I don't believe they have specific dates. They're sort of laid over the original application site plan. A drainage summary report prepared by Muller Engineering LLC, certified by Brian Muller, P.E., dated April 10th. Stormwater management, operation, and maintenance, a preliminary report, also prepared by Mr. Muller, dated April 10th. Soils report prepared by Stephen Danzer, Ph.D. and Associates LLC, certified by Stephen Danzer, soil scientist, dated February 21st of this year. An environmental report and biological narrative also prepared by Dr. Danzer, dated February 21st, 2019. site photographs taken by Wetlands staff dated April 30th, 2019. The public hearing notice published in Greenwich Time, May 7th and 16th, and the list of abutters to whom the public hearing notice was sent on May 2nd. And we have a site development review comments prepared by the Department of Public Works dated May 11th. And then since that list was prepared, there is a revised plan dated May 8th, which you received in your packets and is discussed in, like, I guess I didn't list it on the list, but it was received before the staff report. I just didn't list it on the list.
That's actually what's there now.
Okay. The applicant has a 2.8 acre parcel. They want to subdivide it into two 1 acre lots with a open space set aside. Let's see. Get this wrong. If I say it wrong again, this is
Greenwich Creek.
Greenwich Creek. We call it East Brother Brook, and has a runs to the south along the western boundary of the property. There's a fringing wetland, very narrow here, where the bank slopes up steeply from the brook, and then in the northern area, this is a lower flat, what Dr. Danzer referred to as more of a floodplain wetland. So that and an area to the east would be set aside as an open space parcel of about 4/10 of an acre. Each lot is to be developed with a new house, driveway, patio, retaining walls, septic system, and drainage. And the plan that Mr. Mueller has on the overhead here, May 8th, which we're going to discuss probably at some length tonight, is has the toe of fill required for grade plane at 15 feet from the wetlands, some drainage structures at 20 to 40 feet from the wetlands, and a rear retaining wall that's about 45 feet from the wetlands. One of the subsurface infiltrators here is 62 feet, and the west end of the house is about 76 feet from the wetlands.
Bob, could I just, quick question before you go on. It appears that this plan is different than what we're seeing here.
I have that too. This is actually the alternative.
The alternative is what you were showing. Okay.
This is the alternative, actually, that's up there right now.
Okay.
But again, it's up for debate.
Yeah, we
We're
have-
open to both options.
Got it.
And
Okay.
we can discuss both in depth.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah.
All right, so the one, this is the original plan, and then this is
The
the,
original showed these two walls that are 3.5 feet in height, both, that are 15 feet apart. At different elevations, yeah, it would be tiered up.
okay, just running down a couple of the issues
Can
with
you
this
just
app.
put your mic a little closer, please?
This thing, it's on. Okay, there's development as proposed would increase site impervious coverage by about 7,700 square feet. This would be mitigated through porous asphalt driveways on each lot and 3 infiltrator galleries. This system, according to this drainage summary report, would reduce peak runoff rates and volumes through the 100-year storm, well above the runoff rate reduction of the 25-year storm, which is required in the drainage manual. DPW has completed its review. This is find the plan to be acceptable in concept, but will require each lot as it's developed to come back separately with, fully reviewed, approved plans. So at this conceptual stage, conceptually, the plan passed DPW review. Number 2 on the list, the floodway shown on the map, this tributary stream runs down into Greenwich Creek, East Brothers Brook, right here. And this is a very steep stream. It has a flood plain. It also has a floodway associated with it. And the FEMA map cuts off right here. So as this levels out and runs into the Greenwich Country Club property immediately to the south, the question is what happens to all that water? Is there a floodplain associated with this reach of the watercourse? And if so, how does that relate to the proposed development? Number 3, of the 2 lots, only parcel 2 here, the western lot, falls within the 100-foot upland review area. And as I sort of alluded to in my review of the documents, there are 4 alternatives that have been submitted. The original on the flip chart shows 2 3 to 3.5 foot retaining walls between the parcel 2 house and the wetland, actually, and the open space parcel. It goes, the westernmost wall is along the edge of the open space parcel, more or less. The western wall there is 28 feet from the closest point of the wetland, which is a little jog in the wetland boundary that brings, you know, numerically things a lot closer than they are elsewhere here between the open space border and the wetland. Alternative 1, which you had in your packets, showed the driveway instead of on the east side of the house, it was on the west side of the house with a retaining wall right along the edge of the western edge of the driveway. That and some fill address the grade plane requirement on that plan, and on that plan, the total fill is showed 20 feet from the wetland. Alternative number 2 had sort of fill all around the west side of the house to deal with grade plane. Total fill was shown about 25 feet from the wetland. There was a fair amount of fill shown in the vicinity of the trees along the southern property line, and the question was if that would be impacting some of those trees which are in the upland review area. And then finally, this plan was submitted on May 8th and shows fill around the west side of the house with the fill about 15 feet from the wetland flag 3. And then this retaining wall along the southern property line is shorter and kinked to go around the trees on the southern property line. So those are, as required by public hearing requirements, 4 alternatives for getting the applicant doing what they want to do on this property. In your packets, the environmental report biological narrative had a more detailed discussion of alternatives 1 and 2, which were available to Dr. Danzer to review when he did his analysis. I would only say that if any of the alternatives with fill rather than retaining walls to the west of the house are approved, more intensive erosion control measures need to be employed to retain that fill slope until it's fully stabilized. So erosion control blankets are an obvious thing to use. Might be also good to get sediment traps or diversion swales to keep water from running all the way across both properties and down that open slope. Okay, now, as shown on the planting plan, the boundary between the open space parcel and parcel 2 is suggested to be the limit between, at least per that plan, lawn on parcel 2 and meadow on the open space. The applicant should address whether there's any opportunity or why not push that limit of meadow and limit of lawn further to the east, particularly in the southwest and northwest corners of the parcel 2 property. And whatever limit of lawn there is should be defined by a permanent demarcation feature. Let's see. The planting plan, I think, is fairly well thought out. It acknowledges the fact that there's a very nice stand of ferns in the central portion of this floodplain wetland that should be worked around as the plantings are done. The only thing I would say is, I mean, it does include invasives management, and the proposal listed on the plan said cutting, period, and cutting and leaving the roots in place, which I agree with, because there are some steep bank areas that need to be protected, and the roots, even of invasive plants, can do that. But I would say to prevent resprouting and just the overrunning of the enhancement plantings with these invasives, spot treatment of herbicide on the cut stems would be a reasonable thing to do, and I think the applicant, if this is approval is granted, should be allowed to do that. So we have 4 alternatives. I think the main questions really outstanding are the floodplain, floodway question, the limit of lawn, and which alternative, if any of these, is the most prudent and feasible.
Okay. Thank you, Bob.
Good evening, Brian Muller, licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. I have no problem, and neither does the client, with any of Mr. Clause's comments. DPW, we're going to address all those comments as well. I'd like to start with the floodplain question. I'm not sure why Mr. Danzer called it a floodplain wetland. I think he was just identifying it with a name. According to FEMA, they did study this portion of the creek, and it's labeled as Zone X. If they didn't study it, it would have been Zone A, and I would have had to do a flood study to make sure there was no floodplain here, and I would have had to submit that to FEMA and get them to update their map. This section here is merely just a cross-section from the map, from the actual FEMA map, and the panel number is written on here. And you can go to that cross-section in the back of the FEMA book, and it'll show you this cross-section here, and that it literally drops off. And I think this Greenwich Creek, labeled as that, is a tribute to this pond up here, which is holding back water, and it's also throttling it down through this 48-inch RCP that's there. So even if it did really flood and we had like a 500-year flood, I'm sure this area does flood, and even under a 50-year storm, I'm sure this area does have water, but it doesn't show it according to FEMA. So I think he just labeled it that way.
Just because FEMA didn't do a cross-sectional study doesn't mean...
Yeah. No, they did. They labeled it as Zone X. It would be Zone A if they didn't do a study.
Floodplains just don't, we just had this actually down at another project where FEMA only studied in detail so far, and then it just ends, and then that engineer went and continued the work.
This is just the end of Rockwood Lake Brook. That's why it ends here. There's no floodplain for Greenwich Creek.
In that area.
In that area, no, not until it gets down further. Yeah, there's nothing in that area. They would have labeled this as Zone A. I hear what you're saying. This is just this happens to be a different brook and this is also labeled a brook, and this is a creek, so I think that has a different significance as well. But this is just the end of Rockwood Lake Brook, according to FEMA. That's why their section ends here. This is their last section, or actually their first section, Section A, and then they go upstream from there. Yeah. In regards to the walls, originally we had proposed the walls. I had proposed that this lower retaining wall would be a dry laid stone wall, so it wouldn't be as invasive to the existing wetlands if there were any creatures that wanted to move up as we plant this area, because right now this is all mowed lawn and it's not in great shape either. It's very wet, there's very high groundwater, so nothing really is growing in here. It ends up just being mud and an area for the geese to come and hang out when they're not allowed on the golf course during the summer and springtime. So there has been a lot of droppings there. I like the idea of a dry laid wall here for anything chipmunks or anything to be able to go in and burrow, but I also recognize that these two walls are not exactly the best thing to look at, so we did come up with an alternative, which is just a slope. And I would have liked to be able to do the slope at a 3-on-1, but grade plane is making me do, for an RA1, I have to do 21% for that whole area if I don't use walls. So that's why it pushes out a lot further. Otherwise, I would have been able to end the limit of fill probably right at the open space line, where I would have liked to be able to put a boulder demarcation. Now, if we go with the slope, if we happen to approve the slope, I'll be putting a demarcation line, and also we'll get to the limit of meadow and stuff like that, which would change the demarcation line. Right now, the demarcation line would be kind of in the middle of the slope, which I'm not a fan of for safety purposes, just because then, if, you know, a little kid, like I have little kids, if they fell and went down, and I like a boulder, because those are more stable and they kind of hold the slope, and less likely someone's going to move it or take it down. It's always going to be there. So I had.
Talking about the wall.
I'm talking about using the slope here. Let's say this is the alternative that we like and everybody agrees to. The boulder demarcation wall would ideally be along the open space line, and I'd spoken to the client about that. We both had a little bit of hesitance about it being in the middle of that slope, so he wanted to plant trees in a staggered formation just uphill of that boulder demarcation to give some screening to the golf course, and for the new property owner here to have some screening as well from the golf course, because the golf course is just all open there.
In a flooding situation where these two creeks meet and combine, or a brook and a creek, what's your thoughts on a stone wall versus just leaving the snow open for the water to be able to spread out?
I don't think this would be a 100-year storm event. I don't think the water would even make it up all the way to the open space line. The grade also kind of is higher here than it is here. And this slope here, this is a pretty decent embankment here until it comes out here. This whole creek was really hard to define from a surveying perspective, because the water, when we located this, the water was kind of down. It looked like water does flow across here and around, and even over on this side, but this bank here was pretty well defined. It was a good foot or two higher, and the fact that it stayed like that, if there was, we've had heavy rains just this past year, very heavy, that I haven't really seen in my lifetime. So, and this bank is still pretty much intact away, so I'm pretty confident that no waters would come up that high. If anything, they would end up on the golf course first.
Brian, can you speak to the depth of fill, which is 4 to 6 feet
Mm-hmm.
across the parcel, and what's driving that
Yes.
significant depth of fill?
Yes, so I've done a significant amount of test holes out here. I believe I've done about 20 or 22 of them, and every test hole on parcel 2, which is the lower lot, I hit groundwater within 2 feet, 2 to 3 feet, and as you move down the hill, it gets significantly worse. I even kind of realized it when I was out doing some of the surveying work. I dug some holes with a shovel down here at around the 68 contour, and you dig down a foot and water is right there. There's also clay, a clay silt. It's not 100% clay, but it's definitely very clayey. And the idea of bringing this up was because I didn't want to put it too low and be draining down all the groundwater from the area. However, that is an option. We can lower this to try to limit the filling here, and see. I can analyze that as well. But I really set that basement elevation at an elevation I was comfortable with based on the existing basement elevation, and the amount of water that I see dripping out of their footing drain pipes here. They have a bunch of pipes here. I'm only proposing to reuse 2 of them, and I may only reuse 1 of them because the client is not liking the idea of an easement for the footing drain pipe here. So we might do a pump system up here in the front yard, which this house on the top won't have much groundwater. It's very dry on these test holes. We got down 8 feet, no groundwater. But down here, it gets significantly worse. There's even areas in this spot here where water will just start bleeding out of the ground. So also, the fill was driven too by the septic systems. Those are basically placed about 3 inches into grade. And that's maxed out. I can't get any deeper than that. So we had to fill over the top of those. As well as the separation for the Coltex in the front. The stormwater manual requires me to keep these 25 feet apart. So I had to keep pushing them away, and this 25 feet from the driveway. So with groundwater at test hole 18 at about 2 feet down, I had to be either sitting on grade or up higher, and these systems are about 3.5, 4 feet total in depth. So we had to raise everything up as well. But the main reason for the fill is the groundwater.
So for the septic, so you just integrated a smidge.
Mhm.
And what's the profile? Are you going with galleries?
We're going with a geomatrix system, which is similar to galleries, except imagine it's like a precast made thing of cardboard that they fill sand, gravel, and there's a perforated pipe over the top that'll disperse it into the sand and the gravel, and that basically helps clean, and it provides the voids for the effluent to settle and then flow downhill. And I placed these septics about 50 feet up from the 70 contour where I still had about 18 inches to groundwater, so I make sure that the effluent is clean before it enters groundwater. I don't want it to enter it right away down slope because there is some bleeding here around the 68 contour. That's also why I want to try to save all these trees. We're actually only taking out one tree within the 100-foot buffer, and that's this little guy right down here. But all the rest we would like to try to keep and maintain as much as possible because of the golf course. The golf course actually, you tee off way down here, and it kind of dog legs to the left, but you'd be surprised. There are a ton of golf balls in the backyard. And I played the course, and I probably hit one over there as well. So
if the basement elevation is 70 and your finished floor is 81,
Mhm.
that's finished floor on the first floor?
yes,
So you're looking at a floor to ceiling in the basement of 10 feet?
a little under 10 feet. He uses 15-inch LVLs, I believe. Yeah.
So
and-
that could be squeezed a little bit if you're.
We could squeeze that down too a little bit, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm not 100% sure about this screen porch, if that's going to stay. If that doesn't stay, this will pull this back. But we'd like, if possible, to get an approval with the screen porch, just if it's an option.
Right now, we're just separating
Yeah,
the site in half.
Yeah.
We're not approving anything else.
yeah.
So Frank, my concern is not necessarily the depth of soil, because you get to a certain point and it doesn't really matter after that.
Mhm.
You know, how much, though the fill or the retaining walls are pushed out to the boundaries and that drove the decision, instead of thinking about where you can retain the pre-existing soil. So the soil with the microbes, the organics, are all good things as groundwater infiltrates and then works its way down to the creek. When you bury that or scrape it off and put on fresh soil, mineral-based, generally very shallow topsoil profile, you don't have that microbial and biological community working on the water that is infiltrating. So my goal would be to see, not just can we go from 6 to 4, but where can we push back and retain the existing soil uncomfortable.
Yeah, I get your point. The existing soils out here are, you dig down like a couple inches and you're at a clayey, silty
That's okay.
mess. It's not, I don't really see any nutrients in that soil. All the roots are sitting above it. All these trees out here have very shallow root systems. They're all,
Even wetland soils are not, they're not dead soils.
yeah.
Organisms are perfectly happy to live in that.
Yeah, I mean, again, this isn't wetlands here.
Right.
So, and also DPW has made a request that all the fill brought to the property is a Class B type soil. It has to be tested. Every truckload he wants tested. So it will be a significantly better soil than anything on the site at the moment. So it will be a clean fill. We can even mix in a compost with it.
So the best option is to not bury the soil. So to me, as far as for alternatives and moving out, this is the best alternative considering all the other factors. I don't see that that the record is clear that the fill out to the property line or beyond is necessary. So I'm asking.
Yeah, in this area down here, we can try to pull it back a little bit. We are trying to get as much yard as possible back here.
But that's not necessarily a wetlands concern. In fact, that detracts from wetlands protection.
But it should be a concern, Pat, or Miss Sesto, because if they're not, I know, if they're not playing back here, then someone may want to start playing.
You know what, kids that play in wetlands and watercourses grow up to love wetlands and watercourses.
I know, I grew up
We
like
need
that
those
too.
stewards,
I
right?
know.
Those frogs get dirty.
I know.
We need them.
I'm with you, I'm
Get
with
off
you.
the lawn.
I'm with you. Again, this slope here was basically driven by grade plane. It's not a slope that I'm a fan
How
of.
far away from the house do you have to have your
So you
level
have to
platform?
go 6 feet out from the house at a 2% slope max. And then after that, you can start to grade down at 21%. So
Then
that's,
the grade plane affects us at 6 feet out from the house, not 20 feet.
no, it goes all the way back down to existing
Right,
grade.
existing grade.
Yeah.
But where you've got this level 2% slope,
Uh-huh.
it's rather wide, beyond what the grade plane demands. So you could get down to grade faster.
It looks like I'm 10 feet maybe from the screen porch, so I could gain 4 feet.
And
Yeah.
then the backyard, you could, I'm saying, I think you
Yeah.
can provide a graphic that's more conservative with the amount of existing soil and of the review area that you're burying.
Okay.
And if you go with 8.5-foot ceilings in the basement,
Mhm.
then you're gonna affect the plane that much more.
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
And I-
I still don't think there's that much more of a benefit to this area. I've been out here a lot. There's not much vegetative species in this area. Again, this is all lawn. It's not really being used for anything but lawn
But
right
the
now.
beauty is you're redeveloping, and you'll have state-of-the-art septic, state-of-the-art infiltration, house, and let's get state-of-the-art wetland protection.
Yeah, so we're cleaning it up already.
And making it more.
No, but this whole area is gonna be planted with meadow and wildflowers.
And it should be more than that. So that's the second point, which was in Bob's staff report that we reviewed.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, I mean,
there's a lot of lawn,
yeah,
and that's not great.
well, there's a lot of lawn now too, so,
So, but there's no
The-
infiltration now, there will be, there's no, you know, you're changing this from one house to two houses. You can't just stop. You're changing a lot of things, so you can't rely then on the argument, but there's lawn there already.
I understand
There's
that.
only one house already, so
I
you wanna stick with one
understand
house?
that, I understand that. The way I see the code is as long as we're improving the site's wetlands, that's all that we're required to do. So we're improving it from existing all the way through because we're gonna be required to plant this area prior to the start of construction for planning and zoning, for the open space. So we'll have to do, any filling that gets approved within the open space, we'll have to do that prior to getting building permits. We'll have to plant everything prior to getting building permits. So this area will be restored before construction even starts. So we're talking about improving this area prior to construction as well as during construction and after construction. So we're really making this, we're not going to damage this wetland in any way.
So I've given you my concerns to your record.
Okay, thank you. To talk about Mr. Clause's comment about extending the meadow in the northeast corner and the southeast corner, well, I think we would be open to that. I don't think anything along this slope is really that usable for lawn. I don't think it should be lawn. I think a meadow would be better for stabilization as well. I don't think we would be opposed to that. I'd like to get Mr. Clause and the staff and Ms. Sesto's opinion on how much they would like to see us bring up the meadow and possibly wildflower mix as well. And that can also help us with the demarcation boulder wall that we would lay. That can kind of be a nice curvature to it, or a nice design rather than just a straight line across the property.
Any questions for Mr. Moore? Let me open up to public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to talk to this project and its wetland impacts? I'll start. State your name.
Yes,
for the
sure.
record.
Hi, my name is Evan Scheinberg. I'm at 14 Fairway Lane. We are the property right across the street from the proposed subdivision. I understand there's a Wetlands Commission, but let me just tell you about the nature of the street first, and I'm sure it'll be backed up by all the neighbors. It's a private street right now. It's filled with big houses, a stream, trees, pond that everybody shares in. Putting 2 houses there will block sight lines to the Greenwich Country Club. It will block sight lines to trees, to wildlife. It will change the complexion of the street dramatically. Okay, that's step one. From a wetlands perspective, and I'm not an engineer, nor have we had time to get an engineer to look at it, but I think some of what he was saying is just not true. A once in a 100-year storm, we've had storms where there's been backup water on the street that has flowed into the street with a wall, at least the way I'm looking at it, because there's a big stream that comes down from the country club. And it comes down, and when the water gets heavy, it overflows into the street. And we've had periods during hurricanes and during other events where the street has flooded. And at this point, if there's a wall that blocks that, it may block it from the house that's going to be closest to the stream, but it's not going to block it from the rest of the street. So all that water is going to back up into the rest of the street and into our properties as well. Thirdly, I did have a chance to talk to the lake management company that services our property. They did say that building close to the stream would cause sediment problems, would cause algae to pick up, would cause fish and wildlife to have problems. I've also reached out to the Greenwich Country Club. I'm sure they're going to have a problem with that. Our pond goes into the stream that goes straight into the Greenwich Country Club, and I'm sure that there are going to be issues between sediment, algae, and any factors that are going to be the case that when the house is that close to the property, to the water. A bigger concern, and I'm not sure how this affects the Wetlands Commission, it's more of a planning issue, but it does actually affect it in a way. In the middle of the road, there's a divider with, what is it? Okay. It's a grassy island in the middle of the street. It's got grass, it's got trees, and it abuts both of our properties. Right now, the driveway that comes out is the one place that you can get out without hitting that island. If you're going to make another driveway for a second house, right now there's no place for that driveway to be. The only place that it could possibly be would be down by the stream. And if it were down by the stream, and then we get into safety concerns, which I'm sure my neighbors will talk to as well. If it goes down by the stream, you have a wetlands issue, and 2, you have a safety issue because there's a big bend in the street. And the only way that driveway can come out is out of that way. So you're coming into a blind curve that goes straight over where the stream is. And that's a problem. And I don't see how they can come up with a driveway for that second property that A, won't be dangerous for anybody in the neighborhood who's coming around the curve, or B, which won't have an effect somehow on the wetlands and on the stream that's there. Finally, in terms of how this whole process has gone down, we heard about this for the first time this week. We know that the woman across the street has been ill for a while. My wife has been, checking the property consistently. We've never seen it listed. Nobody has seen it listed. It was just a very quiet transaction direct to a builder, and that also leaves in bad taste in all of our mouths. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr.
Sorry.
Chairman, I'd just like to point out that when we receive the application, we get a certificate of mailing. I don't know what's wrong with this mic, I'm sorry. We get a certificate of mailing that it's an administrative requirement that applicants notify abutting property owners. And the certificate of mailing we got dated April 17th lists Mr. Scheinberg and his wife as one of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 abutters who were sent this letter notifying them of the submission of the application.
What date was it?
That's right, and we send a public hearing notice to the abutting property owners. That was,
What's the date of the letter, Bob?
the date of the letter is, the date of the letter is April 17th, and the date of the certification of mailing is also April 17th, and the public hearing notice was sent more than 15 days before tonight's hearing, and that was sent on May 2nd. So I...
That's the one that we got.
Okay.
We got that about 10 days ago.
Thank you. Could you state your name for the record and talk to the
My
record?
name's Michelle Mattice. I live at 31 Fairway Lane. We've lived there 28 years. And I'm here, and I know you're wetlands, but I want to talk about some of the concerns that Evan mentioned. We bought the road because it's a very special road in Greenwich, and maintaining that ambience and the loveliness is important to us. We don't really understand, if you know the road, how he's going to put a drive on that side. It makes no sense to us because of the way the road splits and the back and forth, the one-way nature of each side of the dividers. So I'm raising it because it has wetland implications if you're going to move the drive of that second house. And then, which he, I believe, wants to start building first. The other concern we had was, and now I'm drawing a blank, but well, I'll let it go. But I would encourage all of you to go look at the property and just try to anticipate, how the houses could be built. And every house is different. The nature of the housing on the street are individual housing. The way the plans look, it looks like he's going to put 2 identical houses up. So we just, again, we don't want it to look like a subdivision. We don't want to detract from the value of our properties. Okay?
Anyone else who wants to speak to wetlands impacts?
Hi, Melissa Levine. I live at 36 Fairway Lane. It's not shown on this site plan, but there is an extreme curve in the road here. So much so that we had people slide off in the winter and come off of here and go almost into the creek. There's a metal sort of gate. And this
Literal
past winter,
wetlands impact.
a newspaper man actually went, so that's how extreme he slid coming down here and went into the creek. So you have to understand, this is a one-way street and this goes the other way. So even for an emergency vehicle, when they come around here, someone's exiting here, traffic is going this way, this person's coming here. How is this person going to come over here near this curve? And if
Good evening. My name is Bart Goodwin. I live at 29 Fairway Lane. Come up this road, go up top of the hill is my house.
You can take this one, sir.
I have this stream, which runs up and goes up this way and then curves around. I'm up here on a hill. I own actually half of this stream, which abuts my property. Across the stream on the other side is the Greenwich Country Club. They have been going through a very large renovation of their greens, which I'm sure you're aware of because I assume you had to approve the plans. I looked down on the 10th green, which just finished getting constructed. It slowed down over the winter because of the winter months and the rain. I watched them put in that green. They had to dig down quite deep. They raised the elevation of the green. They put all new drainage in, and I watched that drainage. I must tell you that during that, the retaining walls, silt retaining walls, failed. I watched major mudslides go into that stream. And if you know, 2 or 3 years ago, the Greenwich Country Club was in here getting they had to dredge the pond as they were doing some construction down there. They had to get permission from me to dredge along where I am contiguous to them, which I gave them. Nevertheless, in the construction recently over the last 6 months of that green particularly, which abuts my property, there's been major flooding coming down off of that green. Now it's all under grass, which I'm sure will mitigate some of that. But they also put a lot of drainage in. There's a hill there, which is the kids love to, any of you grown up here in Greenwich, love to sled on that in the winter. It's the 11th fairway going up the hill. The massive amount of water comes down off of that. Now it's going to all collect around this green. They built collection areas all around it. And that water, and underneath those collection areas are pipes. And there's going to be more water now coming into that stream. It hasn't been tested yet because we haven't gone through a season. But my concern is, some of the comments that have been made before me, is that we have had flooding on that road. I think there's going to be, I'm not an engineer, but I think there's going to be even more water now coming off of that hill because they've redirected the water down to that green, which some of it used to go down into the pond off the other side. Now it's coming down that side. I would think the Greenwich Country Club is going to have a problem because it's already silting up again. And my fear is that with this construction, you're just going to have that much more coming off of that hill. So I just say to the commission, this is my concern, and I think you really need to look into because this I didn't hear anything here about upstream from this and what's going on at the Greenwich Country Club.
I'll take that then. Thank you.
I'm Carol Gilbride, and we live at 160 Stanwich Road. We are 90 degrees to that stone wall at the bottom of the survey. Our property line goes out about 2/3 along that wall back towards the stream. Not only is the stream a wetlands, but we've lived there, I've been there almost half my life. We've been there since the late 80s. The whole hillside that abuts or goes down to that stream is on a rock ledge. We don't have much of a basement. Most of it is a huge rock because the water table is so high because of all the rock in that area. And with all Irene and all the storms that we've had, we had one major tree that was literally straddled that stone wall, which I'm assuming is our property line. It was a 5-branch or 5-trunked 200-year-old tree that just came up at the roots because of all the water and the rock that it's sitting on. The area can't really support a lot of drainage. And they've just actually put a new sand trap out behind us, out towards like where the little legend is on the left. It keeps falling down because of all the water coming out of the hillside. And so they're having to hold the sides of it up with wire mesh. And the other thing is, my neighbors have said regarding the area, it's a bucolic, almost a Vermont-type setting. We live in a small 1933 house, 3,000 square feet. Now we're going to have two mega mansions next to us, staring in our windows and looking at each other. And the rest of the neighborhood, my friend at the corner has a lovely 1930s smaller house. There's a beautiful old antique that was brought from New Hampshire. It's a real mix of architecture. And the club as well enjoys having varied architecture around the course, but with no McMansions. And one would be lovely. Two can be too much for lots of reasons. My other concern is I really don't want to see the trees come down on our property line, because builders have a habit of taking down every tree on a piece of property. And they provide screening for the houses that are going to be built and for us as well. And they are literally on the property line, too far away to fall on any of the houses they're building.
Thank you. Okay. Is it for public comments? Mr. Muller, you want to address?
Address all the concerns or just?
No, I think we're probably.
pertaining? I would just want to quickly address the mega mansion concern. These are not meant to be mega mansions. We're allowed to more than likely build a house that's probably at least 50% bigger than that, according to the FAR regulations for the property.
I guess I would limit your responses to the wetlands impact
Okay,
questions,
okay.
because you'll have the opportunity
Okay.
to address these during planning.
So the driveway placement there, we're actually showing, which sounds like the neighbors won't enjoy. There's actually a missing tree in this nice grass island here that we were hoping that we could get an opening in the island and plant a new tree on the western side where the gap is in those 1, 2, 4, 5 trees there. Maybe even another tree at the top on the eastern side, the far east side, this side, for another tree there.
Wouldn't you have to get approval from?
Yeah, no, we're not giving. Yeah.
Absolutely no approval.
Okay, that's fine. So then, okay. I think that's more of a zoning concern, so we'll move on from that.
It's not, because
Let's just let him,
Can't do a
we
hearing
can't have a
like this,
conversation
okay?
back and forth. One person speaks
Please,
at a
it's
time.
his opportunity to comment.
Changing the street views, that's not wetlands. Water floods the street. Just to clarify, the water's coming from the pond? Coming from the brook? Okay. Okay. Okay, I haven't witnessed that when I've been out there, and I've been out there during some heavy storms, and I can only assess what FEMA has given us, as well as what I've seen. I do believe you, there's been crazy flood events, so I do believe that that has happened. I don't think that this development will have an adverse impact on that. I don't think it'll make it worse. We are reducing peak flows and volumes through the 100-year storm, so there will be less water from these properties going down there than there is today. And DPW has also asked me to analyze the watersheds from on the east side that dump into these properties and flow across the property, so I'll most likely have to add drainage for that water that comes across, so that'll even reduce the amount of runoff as well, which will allow that water to infiltrate into the ground and then flow to the brook. As well, yeah, I could address some of these, but. So the other driveway concern, one of those was in my alternative, was bringing the driveway down here west of the island and into the property, which we can relook at if we're not allowed to cut the island, as well as looking at maybe, I don't like the idea, but expanding the road on our properties to give access to the lower lot, but I don't think that will help the like ambience of the road. I think it'll just make it more commercialized. I like I like the way the road is. I don't want to change the road. And I don't think my client wants to change the road either. And in regards to Greenwich Country Club, my client has been in talks with the president of Greenwich Country Club, and they, at one point, and they still may be, discussing one of the greenskeepers living in one of these properties. That's really all that's wetlands.
Okay. Well, I think you've received a lot of comments from the public.
Mhm.
You've gotten comments from staff as well as the other agency members. So I think you've got a lot of things that you can look at.
Mm-hmm.
And I would move to continue the hearing, or just keep the hearing open until next month.
Okay, great.
Okay?
All right, great, thank you.
And thank you for your comments. Okay, moving along. We have 5 consent approvals tonight. 2019, if you could take your conversations outside, please. Okay. Skip over Dingleton. Okay. We have 5 consent approvals tonight, 2019-045, 2019-048, 2019-052, 2019-058, and 2019-061. Are there any agency questions on consent approvals? Okay. May I have a motion?
Motion approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. Moving along. Pending applications, 2019-017, they requested a continuation till next month, so we will move over that. Yeah, we'll skip Dingletown. I'm not sure if he wants to come back to it when he comes after his conference, but we'll revisit that. Which brings us to 2019-047, 33 Grosset Road, Frangione Engineering LLC for 33 Grosset LLC for construction of single-family residence, driveway, patio, and pool, 20 feet from wetlands. Mr. Clausy, please.
Okay, frankly, I would have put this on the consent approval agenda if we had had the planting plan before I wrote the staff report, because I sent the planting plan in your packets. I think the planting plan is quite good, so that would have been included in my staff report along with these other points that I make, which is this is a very level property. There'd be very little grading. The erosion controls should be very easy to very easily protect the off-site wetlands. The wetlands are off-site to the west and southwest. Let's see. Not a whole lot to talk about. The planting plan shows a buffer strip along the western property line that averages 15 feet wide. Includes shrubs and trees and some herbaceous plants, and I recommend the agency issue a permit.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Good evening. Rob Frangione, representing the owner. We have no objections to the conditions of the staff report, and here to answer any questions should you have them.
Okay, thank you. Any agency questions for Mr. Frangione? No. Any public questions or comments? Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
All right. I'm going to raise one point?
Oh, I'm sorry?
Can I raise one point while you're
Discussion?
making the motion? Special condition 1 can be struck, and the planting plan dated May 10th, 2019 should be added to the list of documents that, this is now part of the permit.
Okay.
I'll redo my motion with those added caveats or comments. Second.
Said motion. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
2. Okay. Service approval. Next is 2015-051, 20 Alpine Road, Debsting LLC for Debbie Schwartzberg for restoration of wetland and buffer. Doreen, please.
First of all, I would like to apologize for not coming here.
Oh, hi.
We're going to
I think we just need to hear from Doreen first.
Okay.
Give a quick summary. So this application is being submitted as a result of a clearing violation in a wetland. The area is about 45 by 100 feet. Previously, the wetland had consisted of herbaceous vegetation, shrubs, small trees, older growth hardwoods, and snags. The owner has stated that no trees were removed, and based on the site conditions, that appears to be the case. She's looking to plant 2 shade trees and 3 understory trees, the sizes of which are acceptable. In addition to this, staff's recommending a minimum of 6 planting stations that consist of 3 to 5 shrubs or 1 native shade tree or 1 understory tree throughout the area that's been disturbed. Of these 6 stations, 3 should consist of shade trees. We should receive a revised plan with the species names, the types and locations where they'll be planted. A demarcation feature is also recommended 15 feet along the edge of the wetland. And then finally, a method to protect the plantings from browsing is recommended. It's recommended that the agency issue an order with the conditions that are provided in the report.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. So I got some of the recommendations just now,
Okay.
but I did get a list of the kind of plants that need to be planted, and I went this afternoon to Troy's Gardens, and I already paid
Oh,
for all those trees and shrubs, but I realized that the business is just not shrubs,
okay.
so I will submit the rest of it to Kathleen, and I was told that it takes about 2 weeks.
Okay, very good. Do you have any questions on what Doreen had?
Yes, I would like to get my fine back. I paid the fine, but I didn't remove any trees. I'm just going to restore everything to the way it was. I bought the property I closed on September 18th, and I was just cleaning up, and I didn't realize that somebody removed the trees, because I just took ownership of the property, and I'm willing and I'm happy to restore everything to the way it was, but I don't think that I should be punished.
So was so the removal was done by the prior homeowner?
It must have been done many years ago, because I will show you a picture of some trees that were left here in the house, and they look like they are at least 10 years old.
So we did have a previous application from '07, and the wetlands were planted with some trees. And we had taken pictures and closed out the application with the wetland. I think you had seen previously, but since that time, it has been cleared.
But we don't know, we're not sure when it had been.
I had understood that it occurred after it was purchased.
It's completely rotted.
Well, didn't you do something on the land? You
I'm
said you were
sorry?
cleaning up the land.
There was
What did you do?
poison ivy. So, we cleared the poison ivy. But I had no idea that they did.
But your landscapers could have pulled all this out when they were doing the poison ivy. That's what. You have a,
So shrubs have been taken out, and a lot of herbaceous vegetation, not trees, but it does need to be restored.
okay, which the applicant appears to be doing. What is the amount of violation that we've
So it's
assessed?
a $1,500 filing fee for landscaping times 3 for violation.
I would support just limiting it to the $1,500 filing fee, given that the applicant is restoring it to the extent to which the agency is looking to do. I'm not sure what the rest of the agency thinks about that.
I would agree with it.
Yeah. Okay. So it would remove the triple damages, so it would just be the $1,500 filing fee. Okay. Okay, well, I'll make a motion to maintain cease and correct order with the additional, with the reduction of the fee to just to the $1,500 filing fee. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, thank you. Next
You want this
is,
back, man? You want this?
next is 2019-053, 371 Stanwich Road, Glengate Company for Joel and Nancy Altobello for patio water feature, driveway modification, and wetland enhancement. Mr. Clausen, please.
Okay, the applicant proposes some minor residential improvements behind their house. A 230 square foot dry laid patio in an existing lawn area, and is as mitigation for the increase that impervious coverage would create. They're going to be removing slightly more driveway, so there's basically less than, there's a decrease in impervious coverage from this. The applicant also proposes to take portions of lawned wetland behind the house. The wetland's quite extensive behind the house, as you can see from the plan. Take portions of the wetland, plant woody and herbaceous plants to basically abandon a lawn that's very difficult to maintain there. Let's see. Because the site is flat, standard erosion control should be more than sufficient to protect the wetland during construction, which the applicant suggests will take 7 to 8 weeks. Deer browse could be an issue, so that should be considered by the applicant. And some of the species proposed are not native. I think some of the non-native species are not proposed in the wetland. They're probably seem to be proposed around the foundation of the deck and the driveway. For instance, Vinca minor, not proposed in the wetland. But wetland plants should predominate what is put in the wetland. And I've spoken to Mr. Embry about the species, I guess the cultivar of holly that's being proposed, and the dragon lady holly, which when I looked it up, it said it doesn't like wet conditions. So that may be something that wants something either more native or more wet tolerant. But having said all that, I think the agency ought to proceed and issue a permit on this project.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Welcome.
Hi. Jeff Embry here to answer any questions that you all might have. Like Bob was saying, I think the Dragon Lady Holly was a mistake on our part prior to submission. I think we're going to go with an inkberry. So.
Very good. Any agency questions on this? Public questions by the professional in the room? Someone like to make a motion?
One more thing, sorry.
Yes.
I realized that I left off that we were wanting also put a generator right here next to the driveway.
Okay. Is there a motion with the reflecting the generator? Is that? So moved.
Is he?
Bob, you're good with the generator placement?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So
Sorry.
there is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Very good. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Application number 7 of 2019-054 is delayed. Moving on to application number 8, 2019-055, 571 Round Hill Road, SC Minor and Company, Inc., for Scott Ganellis for construction of a residential additions and patio 49 feet from wetlands. Mr. Clausy, please.
Okay. It's another example where the proposed residential improvements are located quite tight to the existing footprint of the house, either over existing deck or largely over existing deck or driveway. And again, this is a very flat lot. Standard erosion controls should be sufficient to protect the wetland during the project. Let's see. However, when I visited the site late last month, I found a couple of compliance issues which Mr. Liebman has been informed of. They're not sure, yeah, up here, there's a split rail fence, a little portion of which is shown on your plan. Beyond that fence, this whole area was supposed to be maintained in a natural state per the prior approvals. And it seemed to be, going back, looking at the GIS aerials, but when I went out there, it looked like it's sort of being maintained as more of an extension of the backyard at the moment. So that needs to be discussed, and I don't know, I think just if they stop mowing, it's probably sufficient, but I'd like Mr. Liebman to address that. To the northeast of the house, there's a big pile of landscaping debris up on this hill in the upland review area. That has to be removed, and there may be some restoration needed after that material is taken out. And then when this property was permitted back in 1986, the permit at that time was to dredge this little pond out of the brook, and the agency allowed the edge of landscaping to be right along the edge of the pond. With the increase in intensity of the use back here, and as the director said, they're improving their house, let's improve the condition of the watercourse there. I recommend the agency require some sort of a natural buffer around this pond. And so if those issues are addressed this evening, I do have conditions of approval. And I would recommend the agency issue a permit, but I'd like to hear what Mr. Liebman has to present.
Thank you, Bob.
Good evening, Larry Liebman, representing the applicant from SC Minor. First, let me begin by saying the applicant took ownership of this property on 1/15/19. So they were just as surprised when they got the staff report, and they instructed me to do whatever was necessary to get the additions taken care of, as well as to prepare planting plans. I had a field crew out on Friday. I do now have the debris pile located physically by survey, so that this way, and I have begun the planting plan with a 10-foot buffer, an approximate varying 10-foot planted buffer along the edge of the pond. staff hasn't seen this yet because we found out on Friday. I met with the applicant. They left to go to their son's graduation in down south somewhere, and they said, okay, just if we can get it moving, tell them that we have no objection to preparing the plan and implementing the plan and getting it reviewed by staff prior to. I also have included a construction access to get to the debris pile that will be on the plan, as well as where that piece of split rail fence is there. I'm just going to continue it right across and block off the area that was supposed to be from, they didn't remove the fence, they didn't mow anything, they haven't even lived in the house one day yet. They haven't done any of this, so I have no objections to anything that's written in the staff report, and we would like to move forward, and I will have a plan to Bob as soon as they get back from the graduation so they can review the plan as well, and thank you.
Questions from Mr. Weaver?
Yeah, on the 10-foot buffer around the pond, it's a good catch to add a buffer there, but it looks like it's mostly shrubs and trees from this aerial photograph. So what are you thinking in terms of that 10-foot buffer?
What I looked at from me going out there and looking, I was going to add 3 units of shadblow, put some ferns in front of it so that this way it kind of looks like a landscaped area for them, leaving one little access way if they wanted to get to the pond. And then I also have a couple of blueberries and inkberries. So this way then it could be a more solid buffer in front of it. Now, obviously they'll be giving up some lawn space, but it's not, what they really want to do is they would want to work with everybody and not fight anything. So
Those are what, high bush blueberry? Fairly
yes,
high, yeah.
yes.
Is there a geese issue on this property? Do we know?
Not that I'm aware of. There is some evidence that there is some poop on the ground, on the grounds, but there is a larger pond here that has the bigger issue. They're not really going to skip down and land on that. They choose to land on the other pond.
Well, the buffer will keep them off the lawn if indeed that's...
That would help that too, sure.
Any other agency questions or comments?
Is that a wall that's there now? What is that, a fence or a wall?
There's a
Did you
split rail
address
fence
that?
there now.
Okay, and you said you're leaving that around the pond and then planting the buffer to the
Yes.
east of it?
That's what was allowed originally, so I would like them to do that. They're going to increase that buffer there, and we'll review it, we'll go through staff, and I still would like them to be able to have, if they wanted to go in with their children or grandchildren down in there to look at the pond and do stuff, to give them a little
An access way, yeah, but it just seems it has a lot of shade around it currently.
Yes.
So it'd be nice to try to match what's currently going on.
Right.
Feed the snapping turtles.
Sure.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion on this application?
So you can work with Larry on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you read the recommended conditions of approval, they're very tight with tight deadlines and specific things, which he's basically saying they're going to be doing.
Okay,
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, is there a second? Norma seconds, all in favor?
Thank you,
Okay.
and happy Memorial Day.
Thank you, you too. Okay, so this is... Okay, application number 9, which is 2019-056, 1177 King Street, redness and need for Convent of the Sacred Heart for sidewalks, excuse me, and parking modification 70 feet from wetlands. Is this you, Pat? Okay.
This is an application for the school to construct a sidewalk on the outside of the parking lot, and then to formalize what's now a gravel trail down the hillside to the lower athletic field. Sidewalk, path down to the lower athletic field. It's a pretty basic application. The grades that exist here are fairly steep, so that when you add the sidewalk trying to catch the grades, you have a broader footprint of disturbance, trying to catch down that hill. With that goes several trees. There's one large maple that it has reasonable amount of crown dieback, so the effort to preserve it, I'm not sure is worth the effort. I would defer to an arborist to make that call, whether it's worth the effort. There's the conditions, which include adding more trees to the hillside and also within the parking lot areas, having the trees benefit the parking lot for cooler water, general pleasant shade, will ultimately benefit the wetlands. It's a large wetland system, 13 acres, something in that range.
Sounds about
Big.
right. Yeah.
And it's all down here. This is all lawn area on that hillside leading up to the wetland, and that will remain. Yep. There's a request, the proposal, the application fee associated with the proposal, there's the base fee and then the disturbance fee, which amounts to $10,000. And then there's another, what is it, 13,000 on top of that?
26.
26, because it's 13-acre wetland. So based on the scope of the project, as stated in my staff report, I would support leaving off the multiplier, the 2,000 per acre of wetland. I don't see that the time that went into reviewing this and the nature of the project supports such a high application fee.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, David Ginter from Redness and Mead.
David.
Here to just walk through everything real quick. We've seen the staff report. Thank you for the reduction in the fee, if the agency is so inclined. At least Ms. Sesto has offered it, which is nice. I appreciate that. Two things that we had regarding the comments and recommendations. We'll take a look at the 48-inch maple tree and see if worth saving. The landscape architect, in discussions with her Friday and this morning, she did notice and note also that there has been some dieback on that tree. So we'll revisit it again. We do think that we can regrade that area with a slightly steeper slope. Right now we have it a 3-on-1. We can probably get away with a 2-on-1 slope and save essentially the maple there. We think we can save these 3 maple trees in this area here. And if we work it just right, we might be able to save these 3 in this area here. So we'll present a new plan to staff if the agency is amenable to that and come up with the final tally on how many trees will be removed. The 3 trees that are proposed to be removed up in this area here are spruce trees. They're currently not shade trees, so a couple questions we had regarding the quantities of trees going back in. We have no problem with the 2 to 2.5 inch caliper for every 4-inch lost, or the understory trees. 2 questions I have is regarding the spruce trees, if we were required to replace those with shade trees, or if some kind of spruce evergreen understory tree would be acceptable to replace those with. And then for the 48-inch maple that is declining, if we were going to be having to require to replace that at a 1 per 4-inch, or if we can relax that a little bit to 1 and 8-inch or 1 and 12-inch, something along those lines. There's also another tree label as a locust on our plan here. The landscape architect, now that it's just starting to leaf out, thought it might be a mulberry, but it's not in great condition either, so weren't sure if we can get a relaxation of the requirement for that one as well, potentially.
Well, I think you want to put in a caliper size likely to succeed, right? You don't want to go too big.
I think what's being
Caliper's
questioned
fine.
Is
not
the-
the caliper, but the
multiplier.
mat.
Yeah.
I can concede that 12 trees for the 48-inch is excessive, especially because the crown of that tree is not
Right.
doing its job. It's not like a great big spreading oak. So I would be fine with that. The spruce trees, they wanted to replace those with some other native spruce, similar working equation, that would be fine by me. And I think the mulberry should just be the mulberry.
Sure.
In the mix.
That's not a problem.
Okay. Fair enough. would like to make a motion?
Oh, I'm sorry. You were for the maple tree, the 48, what was your suggested equivalent?
1 to 8 or 1 to 12 inch?
1 to 8?
1 to 8 would be fine. That's a, yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, I'll make a motion to approve with the additional conditions as outlined by Ms. Sesto in her responses.
And to include the fee adjustment.
And also reducing the fee to, I believe it's $10,000 total.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Application number 10 requested a delay. That's 2019-057, 3 Knollwood Drive East. So we're moving on to 2019-057, 36 West Brother Drive, Soundview Engineers and Land Surveyors for David and Janine Braun for construction of pool. I'm sorry, yes?
Sorry, 057 did not request a delay.
Oh, did I? Whoops. 1, 2, 3.
They're going to be delayed, the information just came in late.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so the information came in late, so we'll review next week. What's that? Oh, 3 Knollwood Drive is on, okay, sorry. Okay, 2019-057, 3 Knollwood Drive East, Hackney, Lennon and Slane LLP for 3 Knollwood LLC for buffer restoration 14 feet from wetlands.
So, I believe it was our last meeting, the agency discussed an application which would have bumped this wall out further into the previously approved remaining buffer in order to accommodate a pool. That application was denied, and in the course of reviewing that, it was determined that area that was cleared down here was in fact a violation of the permit, and following that, notice of violation was issued and an application was made promptly, and we are here today. So the basic issues I have with what's being proposed, the material that was submitted prior to tonight, it shows this extensive planting plan, but what I can't discern is how this relates to what was originally approved with the house development. Because when this wall was approved, it went with a planting plan on the low side as well. And comparing the two plans, it just was not readily evident what is new. And in the project description, it speaks to a number of plants that are going in to fix the violation, but that's actually a number describing what was approved as mitigation with the house plus the restoration of the violation. So my basic question was to provide information that allowed the agency and myself to discern what was previously approved versus what's presently approved. Information came in this evening, which I did not have a chance to look at thoroughly, although I did note that the landscape architect still didn't decipher mitigation versus restoration, so I'm not sure the information submitted answers the question.
Pat, I'm surprised that you got a chance to take a look at it at all, considering that we didn't get in until 6 o'clock. But I do appreciate the opportunity to address the agency. John Hegney for the applicant. The differences between the two plans is that mainly focus on the ground cover. When we talked about the violation last time, we lost 2 main trees that were in the wall area, a 12-inch oak and a 28-inch maple. But the 2,700 square feet that was affected as part of this clearing was mostly mitigated with ground cover and shrubs, which were not on the initially approved landscaping plan for our project. We have put some new materials together for staff to review. We've clarified a number of things that were highlighted in the staff report, including things like providing an older plan dating back to October 2016 to provide a better idea of what the existing trees were on the site prior to the commencement of construction. In addition, we've darkened the contour lines to give a better idea of what the existing site grading was and what we've been proposing. I can understand why staff is looking for delay. I'd ask that the agency consider that we've been working at this a long time. We did originally make a good faith effort to try and address staff's concerns when this was first brought to our attention back in December of last year. Not all of our paperwork was in order. But what I would say is that our client has demonstrated commitment to addressing the situation and is willing to add plantings or provide plantings to ensure that there's a suitable buffer and address the materials that were cleared. In addition to some of the other comments that Director Sesto noted in her staff report, some of the caliper and tree heights that she recommended are certainly acceptable to our client and are reflected on the landscaping plan that came in very, very late today.
Does the plan that came in late today address the question that's raised by the director, meaning proposed versus what was already permitted? I heard you say a few things, but I haven't heard an answer to that question.
It's not clearly noted, but what I would say is that if you look at the previously approved plans for our existing approval for the construction on the site, it does not feature the ground cover plantings, which were added in response to the clearing that was done.
So it's not consistent with what was previously.
There are additional plantings in response to the violation that occurred.
You're not answering the question. Not even close to answering the question. She raised a specific concern. And you can try and explain it, but just give us a direct answer.
It is not clearly noted on the plan. We've been at this a long time, and we certainly would have enjoyed to come before you in April. I know that the agency didn't want to further discuss looking at the wall at the time. I will note that if an applicant does ask for an extension of time, the agency is bound by Connecticut state law to provide that. Given the circumstance that we find ourselves in, the number of times this application has, or this property in particular, has come before the agency, and the fact that we've been responsive to staff, and I think that we've shown that with certainly our email records in January and December. I do apologize that this information came in late. I will note Director Sesto did give us the staff report very, very early, and we do appreciate her doing that. But if it's an issue for determining how the planting plan addresses the violation, I think that our planting plan does a good job of that. We do have a narrative accompanying this, noting that we're addressing three different levels of planting with the ground cover, shrubs, and proposed trees in that 2,700 square feet that was affected.
So, Pat, do you need to see this annotated on the plan just clearly in order to come to the determination? Okay.
It's not as simple as saying what was listed and they compare what else. They can say, okay, there's 4 dogwoods instead of 2. This is my tally sheet of trying to figure it out. Okay. I have a +3, a -2, but then a +3 of something else. But part of it was not reasonable to figure out what was.
Let's assume the document that came in at 6 helps you decipher that.
It does not sound like it will. I mean, I'm puzzled because it's not a particularly difficult thing to have provided. We know where we started. There's a landscape architect that looked at that and then said, okay, if I have to do more, I'm going to add and change. I'm not sure why that'd be difficult to provide that information so that we can make a clear assessment of the restoration planting doing its job to correct the violation. And the explanation from the landscape architect that was submitted today did not help at all. So I could not tell you that what's being proposed is appropriate for the damage.
How do we move forward here?
Well, there's,
Well, I would ask if the agency and Director Sesto would accept a supplement to the planting plan that has been submitted to clarify that information. I realize that we don't have that here with us tonight, but
why? Can you explain why?
to further identify what is being replaced in response to the violation.
Yeah, but, what am I missing that a month was not enough time to parse that out?
I'm happy to go through what I did over the last month, but I don't think it's relevant to the agency.
So there's not some, hey, you're asking for something that's really kind of out of this world and kind of difficult for us to give you. There's just internal reasons.
I don't carry much sway here, and I don't carry much sway on the phone with our landscape architect either. So let's just say there are other projects that took precedent, and
And then what's
the earliest that he was able to get to us was today.
So are you feeling like there's going to be no difference between today and a month from today?
I would hope that if we had another month that we would be able to do that. I would hope that the agency could find a way to allow us to work things out with staff so that we would not have to wait another month in order to come back.
So you want the cease and correct order lifted. You want an order to approve, or an order, you want an order so that you can proceed.
Yeah, they are working on the site, so it's
That
not-
is true.
They are.
Yeah, good faith, things are moving forward, so continue to work on the house.
So then what's the remedy? What are we discussing?
It would just be to set up the conditions so that we could move forward in addressing the outstanding violations so that we can complete our project as quickly as possible.
So in order to allow them to proceed with the correction of the violation in consultation with staff as opposed to coming next month, is that what I'm hearing?
That would be our request.
Well,
I think
let's,
this is a pretty extensive planting plan that I would prefer to, I get pretty heavy-handed when it comes to plants, so.
I am still very impressed that you were able to look at any of the materials that came in at 6 o'clock.
You're going to have to defer to your, if you feel like you need them back.
I just don't see the reason to put on staff what should be an agency approval, what the rationale for that is, so I'm inclined to have it come back before the agency.
okay. And then, I mean, it can come, if you are satisfied with what comes back from the applicant, it could come back as a consent approval or something along those lines.
Right, so there's an incentive to get the material here fast. The clarification.
I like to think I made that very clear several times last week as well as today to our development team.
And they are free to go
So-
ahead and do the mitigation plans from the original house. I mean, there certainly makes some sense to do it all together, but, you know, if you wanted to get started, that's certainly within your.
Okay. So I will make a motion to delay then, and if, you know, if staff is satisfied with the response from the
Maintain the
applicant.
cease and
Oh,
desist.
yeah. True. Yeah, I'll make a motion to maintain the cease and correct order until which time staff is satisfied with the clarifications it's requested. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, that was number 5, right? Okay, so moving on to 2019-59, 36 West Brother Drive, Soundview Engineers and Land Surveyors for David and Janine Braun for construction of a pool, patio, spa, and stormwater management system 35 feet from wetlands. Mr. Clausy, please.
All right. This application is to construct a small pool, in-ground pool, not standard 20 by 40, with a spa, patios, and a low retaining wall, pool fence, and a drainage system. All of the activities are right up tight against the back of the house. The closest to the structures is the infiltration galleries at 30 feet to the Millbrook Pond there. Now the spa, there's an existing spa right off of the garage motor court. That's going to be demolished, and a free-form patio between the house and the pond is going to be taken out. As I said, it's tight against the house. Activities are going to be completed from south to north with access from the garage motor court. A couple of comments here about the location of the access point and drain inlet in the motor court have been agreed to by Mr. Mueller on behalf of the applicant. Let's see, the Cultex system is going to infiltrate the 10-year volume. Is it the volume, Brian?
Yeah,
volume. I think I was incorrect in the staff report. It's the peak runoff rate.
Oh, it'll do that too.
Right,
Plus
but
during the 10 years, yeah.
right, but it's going to get the volume. So the question came up about fill in the flood zone, and Mr. Mueller has, subsequent to this staff report, given me calculations that indicate that removing the spa will take out more material from the flood zone than will building the retaining wall that encroaches into the flood zone. So that is, that question has been addressed. And there was a 30-foot section of bank that up in the northeast part of the property, south of that retaining wall on the side of the brook lake is bare soil, bare lawn down to the water. The bank is eroding and undercutting, and the applicant, since the staff report was submitted, has provided a very good planting plan for this. So I believe all the questions have been addressed, and I recommend the agency issue a permit with the conditions provided in the staff report.
Thank you, Bob. Welcome. Any questions on Bob's staff report?
No.
Anything further to that?
No.
Any questions from the agency on this? Public questions or comments? Is there a motion? Motion to approve. All in favor?
Thank you very much. That was much easier than.
Are we, should we circle back to Dingletown while you're here? Mr. Mueller? Okay, going back to application 2019-042, 123 Dingletown Road. Tolulope Goldie, and for residential addition 33 feet from wetlands. Mr. Clausy, please.
Okay, even though this small addition is located pretty close to the wetland, it actually is very well removed from the wetland in the sense that it's on the plateau where the house is. It is going over what is existing patio primarily, and it would have been agent approved in my opinion, except when I got out there, I saw a bunch of trees had been cut down. So after notifying the applicant of the clearing, which I quickly counted 14 fresh stumps greater than 6 inches in diameter, plus a number of smaller trees and shrubs, I recommended that they come up with an accurate count of what was removed and a restoration plan to deal with those removals. That plan was produced by William Kenny Associates. Bill's here tonight, so he can speak to the plan. I'm trying to read this as a reduction. It's proposing 2 trees and 32 shrubs and a couple hundred herbaceous plants, ferns and low shrubs. I mean, the only thing I would say is that there were stumps in other locations besides what's shown on this plan, so I'd like Mr. Kenny to address that point as well. I recommend delay. Well, I still recommend delay until I see, and I don't have any conditions of approval either, so, I mean, we can discuss that, but.
Good evening. So we went out and took a look at this, at what was cut down, and maybe we could start with this image, that there's a map with red and green dots that indicate stump locations, and then I have some photos, and I've numbered the photos and show where the shots are from. So really this is a house sitting in the forest. There's very little lawn on this property, and a very mature forest that, I don't know when the house was built, in the 70s or something like that, I assume. And so these very mature trees around the house. And if you start, actually, is there a pointer I could borrow this one? But if you look on that sketch that I gave you, there's a rock, very steep rock ledge that runs along the eastern edge of the house here. North is to the right. Mm-hmm. So from what I could see and what I understand from the owner is that they were very concerned with some very large trees at the top, both at the top of that ledge outcrop and right at the bottom, that because the house itself was a gap in the forest, the trees over time were reaching for the sunlight over the house and leaning over the house, so they were concerned about the trees there. They should have gotten permission from you, but that was the reason for those. And I think what's interesting, when you look at photos 1, 2, and 6, they're really showing this area. One fortunate thing is that they didn't remove the trees along the edge of the pond, where you usually like to see those trees for shading the water and providing a refuge, perhaps a cooler environment in the summer for fish and so forth to go to along the edge of the pond. So that was fortunate that they left those trees. And there's a little shelf of disturbed man-made wetland. When they made this pond, it looks like they disturbed this area and filled it a little bit, but there's still, it's a little bit drier than it was 100 years ago. And you could see that in photo 1 and 2. That little plateau, a little shelf at the base of the rock. And so it's an interesting area where I think because the trees already exist, you're still getting the shading along the bank of the pond there. And because of that rock feature, that bedrock and the pond, create a natural fence to keep deer out of there for the most part, except for the north and the south. What I was proposing that it'd be an interesting place to just fill that and make a shrub wetland in there. So I filled, what we're proposing is to fill that area with shrubs. And so now let's move to the north of the house where there were some other trees taken from there. And again, here they're away from the house. So there's less, it was less of an issue, in my opinion, of protecting the house. But again, thankfully, they didn't cut the trees that were hanging over the pond and helping to mitigate the microclimate there. And then due to, you'll see here, there's a lot of rock exposed at the surface. The soil is very shallow here. It's really 6 inches on average, I bet, depth of soil over rock here. So trees that are growing here are trees that developed from seed and slowly adjusted to that environment over many years. And because they didn't open up a real gap in the forest there, what I was proposing was a ground cover that it's about a third of it is a low growing, maybe a quarter of it is 70 low bush blueberries, which that is a classic habitat for low bush blueberry, shallow soil, very dry soil on rock, and then ferns and we have ferns and some other ground cover, native ground cover growing there is what we're proposing. When you move to the, and you can see the photos, so what, let me see the number, photos 3 and 4 really show that area. And you can see some of the remaining, the trees that remain in that area. The last, photo 5 and 7, photo 5 is showing a tree just over the wetland line here. That was a dead tree that they were concerned with. So it was not a great tree for a landscape. It's a good tree for a wetland, but in there, they saw it as a dead tree and were concerned about it. And the other tree, photo 7, was also a dead tree on the west side of the house. So that's generally the characteristic of the conditions out there. 1, the shading of the pond remains. 2, the canopy, they opened the canopy just really around the house. Although they took some trees out in other areas, it's more selective thinning. And the canopy generally remains closed in a shaded forest environment. Otherwise, there are a couple of dead trees that they took down, and actually one ornamental tree right at the corner of the house there, I think. So based on those factors, I developed a plan that you have before you. Would be willing to discuss that and answer any questions that you might have.
Question, when you say that the trees to the northwest and west of the house that came out of the wetland?
Yes.
That were dead, was it your client who sort of initiated removing them, or was it the person who did the other clearing, said, oh, there are 2 dead trees over there, you want me to take those out while I'm at it?
I don't know the answer to that. Yeah. Based on interaction with plenty of people over the years, people see a dead tree and they're like, let's clean it up and remove the dead tree.
Right. And this is a fairly new property owner, as I understand.
That's right. Yeah, they just...
It wasn't a licensed tree professional either removing those trees.
Right. Okay.
They were very careful. It was hard to see any evidence of dragging the material out of there. It was very little
Lucky they didn't
disturbance.
hit the house with the trees they removed from the patio area.
Yeah.
The guy wasn't licensed.
Yeah.
Okay, the other thing I noticed, besides the areas that you've highlighted for restoration here, across the bridge on the southwest corner of the island,
Right here?
there were some shrub stumps in there.
Okay.
I mean, an expansion of this low ground cover effect over across the bridge, I think would be appropriate.
That's not a problem at all.
I could maybe suggest conditions, because it is fairly straightforward as far as the construction goes and the restoration. I would say that the restoration should be done by no later than the end of the planting season this fall, with a revised plan to address that area on the island. And then the construction would just be, if there's any change to the plan, we have to see it. And it's a standard condition. We don't expect there will be, because this is such a, very concise project. But if there is, we need to see the plan. We'll need a bond that's, in this location, I would say a $500 to $1,000 bond for the construction, plus 30% for the restoration plantings. And then a 2-year hold on the plantings.
Summarize by saying the conditions would be either the normal special conditions that are applicable to this permit, plus the restoration by October 31st, and the revised planting plan to add more low-growth blueberries over the edge of the bridge to satisfaction staff.
Well, the mix of plants that are on the south side of the bridge gets spread over to the north
Extend
side.
the south side to the
Okay. I'll make a motion based upon what was just outlined by the director. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Okay. Alrighty, 2019-73, Soundview Engineers and Land Surveyors for Charles Felder, construction of a pool and patio 34 feet from wetlands. Right? Felder?
Number 12.
Did I just,
What's that?
2019-060, 73 Sawmill Lane.
73.
Right? That's it?
Yes.
73.
Soundview Engineers, okay, Charles Felder. Mr. Clausy, please.
I thought you were saying West Brother again.
Brian, you really scheduled this well.
All right.
Yeah.
This property, the agency issued a permit back in 2017 to build the house, driveway, septic system, retaining walls on this property, which had previously been undeveloped. And part of that approval, part of the discussion when that was approved was that the original plan came in with a pool on the to the west of the retaining wall, where the rain garden is down here. There was a pool proposed in this area, which there's concern that was like the only level playable landscape area on the property, and that was not appropriate. Well, the property now has been developed, sold. The new owner would like to build a small pool over here, and which was not part of that discussion back in 2017. It's beyond the limit of the buffer demarcation provided by the boulders and lower retaining wall. The pool is shown 35 feet from the edge of the wetland. This is similar to that West Brother project in that access would be from the garage motor court straight across the back of the house here, pulling construction from south to north. I mean, I am concerned this is a very steep driveway. It's porous asphalt. You're going to need excavator, dump trucks, stuff like that, coming, turning, moving across this surface. So that's going to have to be adequately protected and certified after the project to make sure it hasn't been damaged. Let's see. So, having said that, I think the project is theoretically doable without a wetland impact. However, this site is a mess. And I am recommending the agency delay because I'd like some of these things addressed. The old 2017 permit's still in effect, so the site should be brought into some kind of compliance before we proceed with the new activity. We did get a consent from the current owner, so that bullet point 1 has been taken care of, which if it hadn't been taken care of by tonight, I would have recommended denial as an incomplete application. The drainage report, DPW finds that they're confused as to how it relates to what was previously approved and now what's going to be done. That has to be sorted out. The site, as I said, is a mess. The area below the septic system, this slope is eroding. It's bare soil. This is now May. The house is done. They've got grass on their backyard, but the area over the septic is bare and there's a gully forming. That has to be fixed. The level spreader, there's concentrated flow coming from the south end that's forming a little gully that's running around the silt fence here. The retaining wall on the west side of the rain garden is collapsing. This is a boulder retaining wall. Big boulders are falling into the rain garden. There's a bare soil slope at the north end of the rain garden. That's bare soil eroding into the rain garden. And let's see, I mean, just general housekeeping. There's a silt fence that's over top of the silt buried in the back behind the restoration plantings, the buffer plantings. So, in a nutshell, I think the project is feasible, but I would recommend the agency delay until some of these issues are addressed.
Can I borrow your pointer?
Pardon?
And that's okay. If it is the wishes of the board after I speak, if we want to delay, that's totally fine. Just to address some of Bob's concerns, I have the same concerns, and I've actually mentioned to the current owner and the builder who built this property. The property is basically built. I didn't realize it was in such disrepair. The last time I came out to inspect it was when he wanted to talk to me about this, the new pool here, and everything seemed to be in decent shape. Nothing had been stabilized. There was no lawn yet or anything like that. So I'm going to probably go out there tomorrow now and mention everything Mr. Clausey just mentioned. But for construction access purposes, I wasn't going to have them use this portion of the driveway. During the construction of the house, they actually had access in here directly off a sawmill, which I would have them reopen that and use that as like a stair in front so that we don't disturb this steep slope, because the whole driveway is porous asphalt. There's no stone bed that holds water under this area, but it is here, and this is still porous asphalt, so we don't want to have heavy machinery driving up and down it, because that will, move that porous asphalt around and create issues. And then we would only be using like a small bobcat or small mini excavator to move material in and out of here. There's also a small retaining wall that was built here that would have to be or right in this area here, I believe. That would have to be, add some dirt added there so you can have a ramp down. And then to pour this concrete wall right here, there already is this wall that was built that did come all the way to here. But when they redo this for the pool wall, they're gonna have to have a pump truck that's gonna have to pump up and over the house. It's the only way for it to be done. And that, I've already told that to him, and he seems to be on board with that. So that is the idea. I'm not sure how he's going to do that, but Mr. Clausen and I have spoken, and we agree that's the only way. You cannot access from this side. It's just the slope is too steep here. And like Mr. Clausen said, this area is still bare, which I'm going to have to make sure he gets that stabilized because that's not okay. Other than that, like I said last time I was out there, the rain garden seemed to be functioning fine. I'm going to have to check this wall now. As for the application, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer any of the board's questions.
Thank you. Agency questions regarding the application for the pool addition at this point? Yeah, I do think there's a lot of housekeeping that needs to go on with that. Do any of this, any of the current conditions approach the level of a violation at this point? In terms of any of the failed erosion controls affecting the wetland or anything like that?
No, there's not. There isn't a big plume of sediment in the wetland or anything. It's just lack of attention, I'm afraid, and lack of completion. They just had to finish it up.
Yeah, I think he stalled a little bit because he has buyers looking at it to be able to see if they want to buy it with either a pool there. He also had another question about a wall being added that I know maybe would come in front of you, but it would be uphill of these other walls. I don't know why he wants it, but he's, so I think he was in a holding pattern trying to figure out who was the purchaser of the property. So, but I need to make sure that he does stabilize this stuff because he can't leave it like that. And obviously we've had a lot of heavy rain the past 30 days. Just last night we had a lot of heavy rain. So with it not stabilized, that's a concern of mine as well. And I think that needs to be addressed for sure.
Yeah, communicate back to your client that if things are drastically improved by next month, we'll look more favorably upon that.
Okay.
What you're proposing.
Make a motion to go ahead.
Okay, second? Okay. All in favor?
Okay, thank you very much.
2019-062, 93 Cloudbridge Ridge Road, Rocco V. DeAndrea, Inc., for Stephen Russo for construction of pool, spa, retaining walls, and drainage 28 feet from wetlands. Mr. Clausen, please.
Okay, when this house was redeveloped in 1997, a boulder demarcation wall was established between the house and a pond and its fringing wetlands, so this undulating boulder wall here. Applicant wants to, working within the limits of that wall, build a pool, again, in-ground pool, not standard dimensions, pool with a spa and retaining walls, modify the patios that exist there, and install a stormwater system. There is also a plan to put a little boardwalk across a little piece of wetland here, do a platform that would serve as sort of a kayak launch, and establish some paths through the wetland. There is a wetland enhancement planting plan that's been submitted as part of the application. There's a construction sequence on the development plan that indicates the retaining walls will be built first, and so it's not going to be one of these jobs where the grade is brought up raw and then the walls are built. So that will go a long, long way to protecting the wetland during the balance of the project. I had a comment about Phase 2, this wetland work. There's some silt fencing shown through the wetland, and I don't think that that's necessary. So some of those little adjustments in the plan are minor, but should be addressed as the project goes forward. Let's see. The buffer enhancement plan will be supervised by a qualified environmental professional, with the plantings adhering to this 35-foot wide buffer that the agency established in '97. I did ask for additional construction details for the wooden platform to be provided before construction. So I think all of those comments are reflected in the recommended conditions of approval, and I recommend the agency issue a permit.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Welcome, Tony.
Good evening. We do have the A team here. We have Jay Fain and we have John Conti involved, each of them doing the respective responsibilities of designing the bridge and the impact statement. So we were more or less the coordinator in this application. But the comments and recommendations by Mr. Clausy are certainly on target. We've discussed them with the owner and the applicant. The only correction I would make is I don't know where Stephen Russo came into this application. But he'd be glad to take over the home if he could. Anyway. We'll stand with the Salsi. Debbie Salsi is actually the owner of the property, and we'll keep it at that. But she's prepared to accommodate all the recommendations and suggestions made by staff, and we'll provide the final details of those small pertinent features that Mr. Clausy mentioned.
What is the proposed paths through the wetlands in Phase 2? What's the makeup of those paths? Do we know, is it?
I think they just want to have a mulch-type walking path. I think we have to come up with a new term for the pool, too. Like, there was a couple of applications tonight where Bob had not a standard pool, and I think it becomes a focal feature so they can enjoy the back of their property overlooking, that natural environment. In this particular case, the boundary had already been established, and they wanted to work within that. They removed a lot of other impervious surfaces in the plan in order to be able to go back there at the rear of the home and take advantage of the small pond and the walking path through the wetland. Which I think was, it's a nice way to enjoy your property when you got the opportunity to do so. And you're staying within the boundaries previously established when the home was built.
Very good. Other agency questions on the application? Public questions or comments, Mr. Byrd? No? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion? Motion to approve. Okay, is there a second? Second. Discussion? No? All in favor?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tony. Okay. Next is 2019-063, 35 Hidden Brook, Rocco v. DeAndrea, Inc., for Thomas and Mary Stein, for construction of a pool and patio 25 feet from wetlands. Mr. Clausy, please.
Okay, this pool and patio are proposed in an area that's been maintained as lawn for as long as we have air photos. There was a permit issued last year to do some residential improvements. That work is ongoing and is in compliance. This pool and patio in the northwest part of the property is unusual in that it's not going to have a chemical filter system. It's going to have a sort of a biofilm filter system called BioFlow 4 biofilm reactor. So there aren't going to be any chemicals in the water, and I have a whole 30-page brochure if any agency members are curious what this thing looks like. So it's pretty have a restoration plan that was submitted by Bill Rutherford on May 10th. And, you know, when I did the review for the last year's approval, I made a note that there's some erosion at the southern end of the eastern watercourse, and it'd be nice to get a buffer, and that never really went anywhere. This plan has a very nice buffer planting. They're going to be restoring, stabilizing that area. They're going to be planting up the whole southwest corner of the property between the property line and that little brook. So I think this is going to be a great improvement to the property, to the wetlands on the property, and I recommend the agency issue a permit.
Thank you, Bob. Welcome to planning.
All I can add to that comment is, summary is that this applicant is extremely enthusiastic about the significance, the environmental significance of this pool filtering system. Bob pointed out we have a significant amount of literature on it. I am totally unfamiliar with it, but we're eager to see how it works. Everything is underground. As Bob pointed out, no particular chemicals, so we'll see how it works. As far as the landscape plan, Mr. Rutherford did a very detailed plan, very attentive to what had been suggested and recommended. I know there was a lot of ground cover in that south end of the property, which I'm aware of, was going to be removed and enhanced. So that's all a good result. So, again, as Bob pointed out, it's in an area that has been manipulated, modified. It is fairly close to this intermittent watercourse, part of the hidden brook system. But given the improvements that's being made in that area, I think it's a worthy application.
This was, I believe this parcel was considered for a subdivision.
It was, there was a deed restriction that prohibits a division.
Right.
So we came back and kept the same footprint of the existing original home, and then basically reconstructed it, but in the same spot.
I know there's some concern about the old garage being where the pool is.
Right, and then the old pool had been in the back of the home, right up against the property line. So they gained a little room in the back and transferred it to the western end.
Very good. Okay. Questions for Mr. DeAndrea from the agency on this application? Public questions or comments? Would someone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Let's see. Number 15, I believe, was asked for a delay, 2019-064, 7 Dempsey Lane. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Okay, moving on to applications to be received. I will make a motion to receive applications 1 through 12 on tonight's pink agenda. Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Okay, excellent. And lastly, there are 3 agent approval permits. Are there any questions on any of the 3, 2019-046, 066, or 067? No? Okay. Next up is violations. We have 1 tonight. Cease and correct order 2019-007, 67 Caroline Place, JP Greenwich Holdings LLC for unauthorized fill adjacent to wetlands and watercourses. Doreen, please.
Okay. The record of documents for 67 Caroline Place. Photos dated November 13th, 2018, and May 6th, 2019. 2008 GIS map. Violation summary and cease and correct order 2018-15, which is November 19th, 2018. Notice of violation issued May 6th, 2019. Cease and correct order 2019-7, and violation summary issued May 13th, 2019. So staff has been alerted by multiple neighbors in the
assume this is not anything you're involved with, Mr. Burt? No. Okay, very good. Motion to maintain cease and correct order and place a certificate of violation on the land records if an application is received by June 21.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any other business to discuss?
When's the June meeting?
We stand adjourned. Thank you.
I gotta look it up.
Are you done? Meeting upstairs.